Hey, what's going on, guys? So every couple of months, it feels like people debate whether or not Miles Morales counts as the real Spider-Man. And it's kind of a funny thing to just take a step back and look at, because pop culture heads, people who don't really fuck with comics like that, but they're still part of geek culture because geek culture is very popular right now. Their stance on the matter is very definitively, fuck you, Miles Morales is Spider-Man, because anyone can wear the mask. You can wear the mask. I can wear the mask. Lollies from the anime universe can wear the mask. Gwen Stacy can wear the mask, because that's what Miles Morales said at the end of the Into the Spider-Verse movie. And if you disagree, well, then you're just racist. And, I mean, that's more or less kind of the sentiment of Insomniac's Spider-Man Miles Morales game. Meanwhile, comic book fans, like people who sit down and, they read comic books, their stance on the matter is that for the sake of an ongoing narrative within Marvel's 616 continuity, Miles does not work as a character because there's no way that he can coexist in a world where Peter Parker is also Spider-Man. Therefore, Miles is not the real Spider-Man. And again, just taking a step back, watching this debate from the sidelines, it's pretty fucking fun to watch. Because what this essentially boils down to is there being a divide in the Spider-Man fandom between comics and pop culture. Which isn't limited to just the Spider-Man fandom. You see this in a lot of other fandoms too. Case in point, the Marvel fandom as a whole is experiencing this right now, where there's people who watch the MCU films because they read comics, and they enjoy comics, and they also enjoy seeing those comic book characters in other mediums, like video games and cartoons, and they watch the films to engage with those characters, just in another medium. But then there's people who are diehard Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, like they are MCU fans first and foremost, and they see everything else Marvel related as the raggedy-ass bootleg bitch versions of those characters, because the movies legitimize the Marvel Universe and the Marvel characters for them. And you kind of see that same thing with DC too, but to a far lesser extent. Mainly just because DC it isn't nearly as popular as Marvel, and depending on your perspective, that is either a good or a bad thing. But it's really only limited to Zack Snyder, because people who are die-hard Zack Snyder fans, and they just endlessly spam the Restore the Snyderverse hashtag, they're basically in the same camp as MCU fans. They're not really comic book fans, they just fell in love with those movies, and they see them as the legitimate interpretation of those characters. I guess quote-unquote legitimate versions of those. Meanwhile, fans of DC Comics feel this overwhelming sense of hostility towards Zack Snyder fans, and I guess by extension towards Zack Snyder, because they feel personally insulted by their very existence. And this whole train of thought spirals into a completely separate topic regarding fandom and the divide between pop culture fans and comic book fans, and how that divide is further and further widening. But bringing this back to Miles Morales for a second, this is a case where I see where the pop culture side of the Spider-Man fandom is coming from. Because according to those narratives, be it film, gaming, or animation, they've built entire narratives around the idea of Miles accepting and owning his right to the mantle of Spider-Man. And I think within the context of those stories, that idea works very well, and Miles does earn the right to be Spider-Man. The comics, on the other hand, are a little different. So originally, Miles comes from a universe where a 16-year-old Peter Parker dies fighting the Sinister Six on his front lawn, and Miles' pathos for wanting to be the next Spider-Man is born out of a sense of guilt for having these amazing powers. And watching the final battle of Peter Parker go down in real time and in person, and choosing to do nothing as he watches from the sidelines because he's afraid. Which is a great idea on paper. Executed 1,000 times better in the Into the Spider-Verse movie. Be that as it may, Miles worked as a character because he was bound to his own universe where he was the one and only Spider-Man. And then Marvel saw how lucrative it was to have Peter and Miles cross over with one another, so they lazily slapped him into the classic 616 Marvel Universe after the Secret Wars event that destroyed and reformed the Marvel Multiverse, and called it a day. And bro, when I say that shit was lazy, I mean that shit was lazy. Do you know what Miles' new origin is? Which was given to him 2 years after his introduction to the main Marvel Universe, mind you. Okay, so... what the fuck, dude? Okay, so, in the comics, several years ago, there was this event called Secret Invasion. It involved the Skrulls taking over several key members of the Avengers, and there was this major retcon where maybe some of the superheroes that we've been following have secretly been deep cover Skrulls since the 1980s, which I don't think any of them ended up being, so I don't know what the point of that was. But Miles was retconned into getting his powers shortly before the events of Secret Invasion, and his new origin was that... oh my fucking god, saying it out loud, it's fucking painful. His new origin was that he beat up the Skrull version of Spider-Man, and because of that, Peter Parker gave him the blessing to be the other Spider-Man.
Whack.
Do you see how lazy that feels? Especially compared to his original origin, which had, like, pathos and grit and humanity and was relatable. But this new origin, it feels about as thoroughly cooked as medium rare chicken. And the same can be said for Miles' entire mythology post-Secret Wars. Most of his supporting characters that were pivotal to his character development in the Ultimate Universe are either completely different characters in the main Marvel Universe, so it wouldn't make sense for them to know Miles in this new setting, or they've been dead for like whole ass decades. And again, this is the problem. This is why comic book fans have such a hard time connecting with Miles and appreciating him to the same degree that a lot of pop culture fans do. It's not really the case of, well, comic book fans, they're just racist. Although, to be fair, I can't speak for everybody. I'm definitely sure that there are people out there who hate Miles Morales solely because he's Afro-Latino. I'm not going to sit here and play the naive game and say that they don't exist. That would be me bullshitting myself. I'm not going to do that. But in working at my local comic shop for a little bit and making YouTube videos since, like, middle school, I think I can safely say the vast majority of comic book readers who aren't fans of Miles aren't racist. If anything, they want to like Miles. We want to like Miles and embrace him as his own unique character and not just see him as simply being the other lesser Spider-Man. The problem is that Marvel Comics often treats him like the other lesser Spider-Man, which is a problem that the other Spider-Man in comics didn't and don't have. And it's funny, I've run into a lot of pop culture Spider-Man fans who often ask me, and other comic book fans, yeah, well, what's the difference between Miles Morales and Ben Reilly? Or Miles Morales and Kane? or Miles Morales and Miguel O'Hara. You know, why are they seen as legitimate Spider-Man mantle takers, but Miles isn't, huh? Well, for starters, nobody fucking likes Kane. Let's just put that shit to bed right now. And second, nobody likes Ben Reilly either. Well, outside of his various costumes, which I'll admit are all 100% better than Peter Parker's costumes, with the exception of that one that he wore with like the weird smile under his mask. That shit just was off. I don't know what they were thinking with that. But all of the others are like certified nuclear fucking bombs. But as a character, Ben Reilly is like a fucking prom night dumpster baby that you force yourself to raise for the next 18 years, despite the fact that you don't actually give a shit about him. All he does is remind the majority of the Spider-Man fan base of that one weird 4-year period when the entirety of the Spider-Man comics line was just pure ass fire and the definition of unreadable. So whenever he shows up, most of us just look at our watches and count the minutes, the hours, the days, the months, just waiting for him to go away so that we can go back to reading and hopefully enjoying Spider-Man comics. But as for Miguel, everybody likes Miguel because he's a fully fleshed out character. He operates in his own distinct setting with his own distinct supporting cast of characters that are built around both him as well as the world around them. Miguel is nothing like Peter Parker. Peter is Spider-Man due to a moral obligation he's taken on after he caused the death of his uncle, and Miguel is Spider-Man because he's an industrial saboteur. They are not the same. Miguel has his own motivations and characterization. He is well-rounded. He is well thought out, as is, or I guess as was, the world of 2099 for the most part. Just the stuff that was cool, not the other shit that was terrible. And Miles doesn't have that. And again, it sucks to say this, but until the creators and the editors behind Marvel Comics stop treating Miles like an afterthought, well then so will we. Miles in the comics, 11 years after his creation, still feels like a half-baked idea coasting off of the powerful image of a black teenager wearing a Spider-Man costume. And that's the problem. And that is the most clear and concise way that I think I can put it. Anyways, those are still my thoughts all these fucking years later. But what are your thoughts? What do you think about Miles Morales as a character? Whether it be on film, or the games, or the comics, if you have opinions. Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share it, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you gotta do is subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you're alerted to when I post stuff, you know, like posts, or polls, or like gameplay videos, or videos like this, or whatever. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.
Too soft. He's a low-energy menace. Too easy. Maybe he's a weak-minded... Oh!
Hey, Jonah! Looking good! Very festive!
Menace! A feckless, treacherous, unhinged menace!